January 25th. I'm talking about 1949. In the Constituent Assembly, the speeches that were made in January, the choice of January 26th as the Republic Day, all these were very elaborately discussed, and therefore I thought on the eve of the Republic Day, this is a right day for us to have the second lecture. The third lecture hopefully will be in February, when we would like to present the changing international situation from the 19th century, 20th century world to the 21st century world. Just facts, not much of scholarship or analysis, bare facts being presented to very distinguished elders. Not that they do not know, but only sharing some of our thoughts and recollecting some of those great events of the past. Now, when we talk to the first lecture, the founding of the Indian National Congress, several interesting things happened. Just briefly recapitulating what was said earlier. An Englishman, Evo Hume, was the founder. Many people attributed motives to Hume. Why is this man doing? After all, in 1857 there was a great Indian mutiny, and is this man trying to divert the attention of the people? Is this man trying to dilute the interest of the people by founding the Indian National Congress? Such questions were raised. Gokhale answered it very aptly. Evo Hume was supposed to have discovered a safety valve. The Congress was a safety valve for the release of emotions of people. Safety valve. And Gokhale said, the safety valve became the lightning conductor. It energized the people. It invigorated the culture. It brought about new enthusiasm among the people. The safety valve became the lightning conductor. That was the transformation. As I mentioned in my first presentation, Hume, look at the generosity of the man. Hume's speech at the Calcutta University just before that was a wonderful exercise in nationalism. Hume was an Englishman. The goals he set for India. And the man was so generous. He didn't want to occupy the presidential chair at Bombay. He invited W.C. Banerjee and made him sit in the chair. Look at the strategy. Hume thought that if he had sat in the chair, people would have attributed motives. This is an English organization meant to protect the interests of the English. Therefore, Hume very generously, graciously invited Banerjee. Gokhale wrote 15 years later, if it were not an Englishman, the Indian National Congress would not have started functioning at all. Because he was an Englishman, it got necessary support, it not got necessary acceptance, it was not harassed by the government, and the Congress started functioning. 1885. This was a very interesting. I digressed slightly in the first meeting. I would like to repeat, I was very happy. Science, it is said, disproves more than it proves. History also is like that. That day, when Ramakrishna, president of the Andhra Pradesh Historical Society, came, he's an outstanding historian, Andhra historian. I asked Ramakrishna, do you know Prakasam is the first Indian political leader to have played cricket? The first cricketer among Indian political leaders was Prakasam. Ramakrishna said, where did you get it? I said, I got it from his autobiography. I missed it. Then when I said it, another historian, Somasundar Rao, was such a sharp historian, he tried to correct me. Maybe some Parsi leaders might have played cricket earlier than Prakasam. We don't know. I said, at least first South Indian leader, because the Parsis were very active in the Congress. Anyway, 1884, I digressed. Prakasam was a boy of 12 years, and these boys, cricket just then arrived. They had no money. Therefore, what they did was, a paddy crop was there lying in the field. They stole it. They wanted to sell it the next morning for stumps, bat, etc., etc. They were caught by the police. They were arrested. A generous police officer said, these fellows are playing cricket. Why do you arrest them? He let them off. So that was the time when many interesting things were happening. Very interestingly, first president was an Englishman. The second president was a Parsi. The third president was a Muslim. First president was an Indian, a Hindu. The second president was a Parsi. The third president was a Muslim. And the fourth president was an Englishman. Hindu, Parsi, Muslim, Englishman. That's the sequence. And so, if you look at the first 20 years, 4 Parsi leaders, 4 Muslim leaders, 4 Hindu leaders, they really organized the Congress, the infant Congress organization, into a very powerful movement. These were called years of consolidation. Then on the scene come 2 giants of personalities, Gokhale and Tilak. And what happened we know. And when Dadabhai Naoroji was the Congress president, Jinnah was his political secretary. Many interesting things were narrated. And so first 20 years, it was dominated by all streams, all cultural streams. There was no particular religion or no particular region that dominated. Very interestingly, first session at Bombay, second session Calcutta, third somewhere, I think Madras, fourth Allahabad, and the seventh where our Telugu man Anandacharlu became the president at Nagpur, where C.K. Naidu's grandfather was the chairman of the reception committee. They went on rotating this at different places to mobilize people of all streams. Therefore, the Congress grew into a credible movement for certain goals, not total freedom. Then we covered all this in the first lecture. We also covered how Annie Besant awakened the people in 1917. She called herself, "I am a tom-tom arriving in India to awaken the people." She spoke at 1917. That's a different story altogether. Then comes the great man, Mahatma, the second phase of the movement. And then, as I said earlier, the Congress was still in a chaotic condition. A chaos was pro-changers, no-changers, rightists, leftists. What kind of ideology should be pursued? And this man comes with a different agenda altogether and then infuses a new enthusiasm, gives the Congress a different direction altogether. In the 20s, very interesting discussion took place. Nehru and Bose were the younger generation. They belonged to the younger generation. Gandhi belonged to the older generation. Interesting correspondence between Gandhi and Nehru. Gandhi says, "I am not able to understand the aspirations of the younger generation. You are all very dynamic. Perhaps I would like to learn something from you," in all humility. He tries to cajole them, persuade them. And Motilal Nehru finally jumps into the Congress. The differences between the Swarajis and the congressmen, all these have been overcome. And by 1930-31, the Congress was firmly in the hands of Mahatma Gandhi. And what happened, we know. Ladies and gentlemen, the journey of the Congress was particularly difficult because of the global situation. The First World War had ended. The First World War, why was it called the First World War? People often ask a question, were there not world wars earlier? One historian said, the First World War was in fact not really a world war. There were many wars fought. All of you must have read about the 100 Years' War between England and France. How can 2 countries fight 100 Years' War? Isn't it? Between England and France, 100 Years' War. It is just like in our Palnat Yuddham. What happens is the warriors go to the battlefield in the morning with all their lunch boxes, etc. Come back home at night, take rest. Next morning, Divinchi pump away. Again they start from the battlefield and come back, take rest. People used to take rest and fight wars, resume wars earlier. But in the 20th century, the First World War was the longest, bloodiest, costliest war, which destroyed 4 great empires directly or indirectly. The Turkish Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Habsburg Empire, the German Empire, all these empires, the Russian Empire, they crashed. In the place of 4 empires came 8 big states. It was at that time that India was awakening to the reality of a dream of a independence as envisaged envisioned by Mahatma Gandhi. Woodrow Wilson was the President of America. He was a very popular man. He was a statesman. Those days there was no television or even radio. Radio started working prominently in discourse or in communications only after 1923 in America. Before 1923, radio was not a powerful medium. The first American president to have made good use of the radio was supposed to be Hardinge. And so radio began to pick up. Those days, remember, newspapers made Woodrow Wilson a hero. That man came all the way by sea from America to Europe, and he was a handsome man. He was a professor of government. He was welcomed everywhere. And he said, I am going to give you a peace plan for the world, no more wars. After the First World War, people said, never again, because they were horrified by the loss of blood, by the loss of life, by the loss of property. Never again. But so when Wilson came, he was the Messiah of peace. Even the Pope welcomed him. And Wilson said, I have 14 points. These 14 points are supposed to be the modern charter of peace in the 20th century. The French Prime Minister, Clemenceau, was a very mischievous man. He was bald and mischievous. And one historian said, bald people are more humorous and more mischievous. If Varhal Chetty permits me to use this, I am quoting a historian. Bald people are more mischievous and humorous than people with lot of hair. Interestingly, digression, in Russian presidency, there was a theory called hirsute theory. The hirsute theory means in Russia, it seems a succession. One bald man, another man with thick hair. That went on, it seems, for 45 years in Russia, from Stalin onwards, Lenin, Stalin, etc. That's a different thing altogether. So this Clemenceau, the French Prime Minister, very mischievously said, God was satisfied with 10 points. Mr. Wilson is not satisfied with 14 points. Isn't it? Wilson thought he was greater than God. So these were the 14 points. At that point of time, India was now moving in a different direction altogether. India was marching towards freedom. Now, we know very well, India was Mahatma Gandhi's civil disobedience movement, 1930-31, what happened? And in 1935, the government of India, to dilute the movement, came up with a framework called Government of India Act 1935. This act, very famous act, infamous act. At that time, you know very well, there were 2 categories of states. British India provinces, we were all living in Madras Presidency province. Central provinces, United provinces, Bombay, Bengal, etc. British India provinces on one side, 565 princely states on the other. The Government of India Act 1935, it's a very important act. It promised a federation of Indian states. But the British were very, very famous for their policy of divide and rule. They made a condition. We are offering you a federation. The princely states and the British India provinces will live together. Everybody said, clap, wonderful. On one condition, the British India provinces would join this federation, but the princely states, only 50% of them agree, then there will be a federation. 50% of them won't agree. Therefore, the federal part of it will not come into being. They showed something on paper which was impossible to realize. 1935 gone. Now we come to 1938. This is a very important year in the history of the freedom movement. Jawaharlal Nehru at Haripura, Nehru took over the leadership. In one of the famous letters, Gandhi said, I may be the leader of the nation as far as freedom struggle is concerned, but in external affairs, you are my leader, I am your follower. He writes to Jawaharlal Nehru. And Nehru in 1938, he made a speech at Haripura, which is one of the finest speeches of the 20th century. He said, India, when it becomes free, would desire to live in peace and friendship with all countries, and India would work for international cooperation and goodwill. He used the words world order, disarmament, and security. 1938 was one of the darkest years. 1939, the Second World War broke out. People laughed. When the world was preparing for war, Nehru was preparing for peace. What a contradiction. But Nehru was an optimist. He continued this after he became the vice president of the interim government in 1945, 7 years later. He talked about the same thing as foreign policy, author of India's foreign policy. Nehru said, as vice president of interim government in 1945, India would follow independent foreign policy without being aligned to one group or the other. India would not be aligned with any group, would follow a policy of good relations with all, close relations with neighbors. He declared his policy. And please remember, our motto is anti-imperialism, anti-racialism, anti-colonialism. These were the goals of foreign policy. 1946. I would like to here mention that India was impacted by the happenings in the world. Three important things, especially 2 or 3 children are there for whose benefit I must mention. The 20th century, 2 very important documents are often quoted, 3 documents for that matter. One was in 1942, the American President Franklin Roosevelt. If Woodrow Wilson had come up with 14 points, Franklin Roosevelt, all of you know very well, that Roosevelt, Stalin and Churchill, they brought about a change in the fortunes of the free world during the bloodiest war in human history, the Second World War. The Axis powers, Hitler, Mussolini and Japan, they were literally plundering one country after the other. Historian Gunther wrote a very famous line in which he said, while the British Prime Minister takes weekend in the country, Hitler takes countries in the weekend. Because every month he used to eat away one country. The British Prime Minister used to go to the countryside for his rest. While the British Prime Minister took weekends at the country, countries were being taken away by Hitler. At that point of time, Churchill, Stalin and Roosevelt, they brought about a change, and one of the most famous declarations of the 20th century was the 4 freedoms in 1942. Roosevelt said, if the war ends, if humanity enters a new phase in the progress of human civilization, 4 freedoms would become most important. These 4 freedoms are freedom of expression, freedom of religion, freedom from want, and freedom from fear. When we were teaching these freedoms, our students, luckily or unluckily, many of them used to come from Telugu medium. It's not their fault. You see, our constitution, fundamental rights, right to freedom, right to religion, right to property, right to education, and right against exploitation. The students, by mistake, they would say right to exploitation. It's not their fault, because the language is such a preposition, etc. They would say right to exploitation. Now, similarly, students would come and ask, sir, you used of in 2 places and from in 2 places. What is the difference? We have to get out of tricky situations. We'll simply say, just as when students come and ask a question, what is the difference between science and art? The simplest answer a teacher can give is, science is learning, art is doing. Science is learning, art is doing. Oversimplification. Similarly, we used to say, of is positive freedom, from is negative freedom. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion, right to education, right to culture. These are positive freedoms. Freedom from fear, freedom from want, these are negative freedoms. Vimukti, daridra nunchi vimukti, bhayam nunchi vimukti. This is freedom from. Roosevelt articulated 4 freedoms. It was in the same year that a famous economist by name William Beveridge, he came up with a proposal, social insurance, and presented a plan to the world. Welfare state was born in 1942. It is called Beveridge Report. That man identified 5 giant evils which must be removed. What are the 5 giant evils? Want, disease, ignorance, idleness, and squalor. Want is poverty. Disease is we know. Ignorance illiteracy, etc., idleness, and then squalor. We call it pollution today. If these 5 giant evils are removed, it will be a welfare state. So, please look at this. I am mentioning this because there is a purpose behind this. These become the inspiration for 2 very important chapters of the Constitution. I shall come to that shortly. So, one side, economic and social security. On the other side, liberty, freedom, etc. Beveridge Report and this, 1942 and 1942 Beveridge Report and Roosevelt's 4 freedoms. Now, when the Constituent Assembly started meeting around this time, something very interesting was happening. 1946 December to 1949 December. To be very precise, 2 years, 11 months and 18 days. Remember, the Constituent Assembly was made. Around that time, Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor Roosevelt, very great lady. You know, Roosevelt was a paraplegic, disabled. He was always moving about in a wheelchair. And it seems the lady, at the height of the war, when Roosevelt was overworking, when his secretary also, when they were overworking, this lady used to come and say, "Boys, it is getting very late. Go to sleep. Switch off the lights." She was a very tough lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. She was made the chairperson of the Human Rights Committee to draft human rights. What are these human rights? All of us know 30 articles are there. The Human Rights Declaration was passed by the General Assembly on December 10th, 1948. December 10th, 1948, it is also the birthday of C.R. Reddy, and C.R. Reddy, December 10th, 1948, made a very famous speech in Andhra University. 2 very interesting points of coincidence. They were celebrating the passage of Human Rights Declaration in America. C.R. Reddy was making a great speech here. He awarded the Katamanchi Ramalinga Reddy National Prize to Aurobindo. He awarded not exactly on the day, he awarded the Katamanchi Ramalinga Reddy National Prize to Aurobindo. Aurobindo accepted the award and sent a beautiful message about Andhra University, Andhra Renaissance, Andhra culture, etc. That's a different thing. Now, this was past human rights. An interesting thing, the human rights, when the declaration was being made, this is a very insightful point because all of us know fighting a movement is easy. Sitting together and arriving at compromise is very difficult. What is going to happen to Andhra Pradesh tomorrow if at one meeting I said if should not be used. If something really happens, arriving at a formula, consensus is one of the most difficult things in politics, agreement. Now, the General Assembly was meeting. General Assembly, when it met, first article, 30 articles are there. Article 1, somebody proposed. Somebody has to propose, isn't it? He proposed, all men are endowed by God with reason. First article. Any objection? The communists got up. Who is this God? We don't want this God. All men are endowed by God with reason. Who is this God? There is no prayer as such in the United Nations. All that they do is 1 minute silence, they stand up. We object. Then there was a fight. Then immediately, all right, compromise. Somebody said, okay, all men are endowed by nature with reason. Then the God supporters got up. What is that nature? We object to that. Finally, after some fight, they said, let us remove both. All men are endowed with reason. Any objection? No objection. This was passed. This was passed. This was how writing a constitution is so difficult. I shall come to that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what happened was, Eleanor Roosevelt prepared 18 members were there, lawyers, intellectuals, scholars, economists. They drafted a beautiful charter, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, passed. It's only something like our directive principles. I'm mentioning this because at that time, the directive principles of state policy were also being formulated in it. Look at the coincidence. At the global level, it was happening. At the national level, this was happening. So, finally, they said, it was passed by the assembly. It came into force. Of course, states need not accept, may accept, may not accept. In a beautiful speech, Eleanor Roosevelt said, human rights do not originate in the charter. Human rights do not come from above. Human rights originate in every home, in every school, every farm, every factory, every place of work. What a beautiful definition. Human rights do not originate in the charter. They come from everywhere. So this was the time when the Human Rights Declaration was made. So my humble submission to this gathering is that the Indian Constitution, when it was being made, 2 or 3 very important things were happening. One was the impact of Beveridge Report, welfare state. India adopted the welfare state concept, a socialistic pattern of society. Secondly, 4 freedoms, fundamental rights, inspiration for fundamental rights. Thirdly, Human Rights Declaration, a world order, which Nehru talked about in 1938. This was a confluence of several ideological streams that flowed ultimately into the great Constitution of India. That was the inspiration. Now, simultaneously, I must also get back to Mr. Nehru, Vice President of the interim government. What a division of work labor. Patel was concentrating on integration of states. Ramachandra Guha, in a very brilliant chapter, he says, 565 days, 2 persons were responsible. One was Patel, the other was VP Menon. When I read about Menon and Patel, my God, what amount of work they turned out, day and night. 565 days. In one line, Ramachandra Guha very cryptically describes 3 states before August 15th and 3 states after August 15th gave trouble to Patel. And all the 6 were easily solved. What were the 3 states that gave trouble to Patel before August 15th? Travancore, Bhopal, and Jodhpur. They refused to join. And you must read really Kautilya, Sadhashastra, Samaveda, etc. Patel used more techniques, literally brought them into submission by sleight of hand, whatever it is, something extraordinary he did, warned them. VP Menon was there by his side. So they were solved. 3 states after 1947. Hyderabad, the 3 states before August 1947, Travancore, Bhopal, Jodhpur. The 3 states after August 15th, Junagadh, Hyderabad and Kashmir. Hyderabad was solved in less than 1 year, Junagadh in less than 6 months, and Kashmir, of course, remains a problem still. That's the story. Now, Jawaharlal Nehru, in the meantime, he was consolidating India's foreign policy. All of us now refer to that inspiring, I'm sure most of us heard this over radio, his midnight speech. If we have not heard on that day, at least the video or the film that is often shown to us, August 14, 1947, just those 2 lines, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny. What is tryst? Tryst is appointment, time and place, choice of time and place, rendezvous, something like that, meeting. Long ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge, not wholly or in full measure, but very substantially. At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. Beautiful, stirring lines. A moment comes which comes but rarely in history, when we step out from the old to the new, when an age ends, when the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance. These are the lines which every schoolboy knows. Here, I must also bring to your kind attention Sri Aurobindo's famous message, which is not known to many, but somebody asked a question. Interestingly, Aurobindo was born on August 15th. Freedom also came on August 15th. His devotees, disciples, they interpret it in different ways. But then Sri Aurobindo, on that day, 14th of August, he said, I have always held